Squirrel. Do you believe that you're shitty with money and that there's nothing you can do about it? In this episode, I'm going to tell you why it's not your fault and show you, yes, you, how you can actually be a badass with money. Squirrel. Hi, I'm Katie McManus, and this is Business Strategy for Weenie ADHD-preneurs. Squirrel. Previously on Business Strategy for Weenie ADHD-preneurs.
I remember being a poor student in France when I was living there for half a year to learn French. And I had no money in my bank. I had like 300 euro in my bank. And I saw these boots and they were 200 euros. And I called up my mom. I think I had like 10 minutes left on my cell phone for the month. I called her up and I made this case like why I needed the boots. And my mom was, fully for it. She was like, yeah, it sounds like you really need the boots, right? And so I walked in and I bought the boots, and then I had to borrow money from my parents to buy food. And ADHD, this is not just me. ADHD people, we know our allies for spending money and making decisions.
Squirrel. That was past Katie in episode 1. Yeah, so that was a pretty typical story of me in my early 20s, and it honestly continued through most of my 20s until I really reckoned with my relationship with money. And that story is really, really common with people with ADHD because we get our ADHD honestly from our parents, who probably got them honestly from their parents. Now, my parents both have ADHD. One is diagnosed, one isn't. So it's an inherited trait. It's genetic. And sometimes I still slip back into that. So I just want to reassure everyone that if you're working on your relationship with money and you feel like you're making progress, and then you occasionally slip up and make an impulse purchase, you're not broken. You're not hopeless. Like, you can absolutely get better with your money. And having ADHD is just an extra flavor to make this more interesting. So let's look at it that way rather than you being broken or extra up. No, you have extra variety here to work on your money story. So I want to point to a couple of things in that story. So here I didn't have a lot of money. I'm living in France, so I had a couple stressors happening, okay? And this is really normal for people with ADHD. We have anxiety in general because our brains operate differently than what the world is set up for. And so we tend to have a little bit of anxiety. We can be depressed. We're also far more sensitive to any perceived rejection. So we have bad days. We have days where we feel really down on ourselves, and that's normal. That's part of being an ADHD person. We also know from a very early age where we can get a really easy dopamine drip from. And shopping and making purchases is one of those things. Now, I learned really early on that when you're having a bad day, my mom used to take us to Target. And I remember she'd say, okay, you can pick one toy. We're having a tough day. And we used to call it Target. So we went to Target because it was fancy. And she'd sit us in the car, my sister and I, and she'd say, okay, you can pick one toy. And we go in and we go to the Barbie doll aisle, and my sister and I would each pick out a Barbie doll. Now, how that obviously showed up later in life is I had a rough day, like when that day that I was in France and I'm walking down the street and feeling sad and it was raining and all this stuff. I needed to buy something. I felt like that was going to be the thing to fix the problem that was happening in my life. And we tend to take all this evidence, all these stories of these bad purchases that we've made. Maybe they were great purchases, but they were just a lot of money. Maybe it wasn't the best use of our money at the time. Like when I was in France and I probably should have spent that money on food. But we take all these stories of when we've made purchases that we shouldn't have, and we add it to this big book, this record book that compiled all the evidence that we have on ourselves that we're shitty with money. And anytime we make a purchase that we shouldn't have, we add it to this book. And we just get more and more convinced that we're just shitty with money, and that's the truth, and it's always going to be the truth. There's no fixing it. It's just one of our character flaws. And I hate to break it to you, but it's not. It's not the truth. It's not a character flaw. There is a way to rectify this. Side note, I have to say this. So anytime I use the word rectify, I think of rectum. And then I'm like, I get distracted and I'm like, don't make a butt joke. Don't make a butt joke. I don't know if that should go in the podcast.
Oops.
My brain constantly thinks of embarrassing things. And like whenever I pick up my hair like this, it's because I'm getting hot because I'm thinking of being embarrassed. It's just a nervous tick I do. Anyway. Where was I? So what it takes to rectify this problem is you have to both recognize how you act differently as someone with ADHD, okay? Which is normal. You have neurodiversity, okay? You're going to act differently. There's diversity there. And you also have to look at your relationship with money, which, by the way, you didn't come up with on your own. You inherited it from your family, just like you inherited your ADHD. And just a side note here, your relationship with money didn't just come from your parents, and it didn't come from your grandparents. Our relationships with money generally come from about 7 generations back. And I don't know about your ancestors, but my ancestors around that time, they were dealing with famine. They were dealing with shifty governments. They were immigrating to a new country where they didn't know anyone and they didn't have any resources, and where they were less likely to get a job because they were immigrants. They had to have what I call poverty pride, which is anytime you hear someone say that their grandma or their grandpa, like they came here with nothing and they made it work and they only made $2 a week, but they're able to feed 8 children on that and send them to college. That's poverty pride. That's having pride in having so little limited resources that you had to get scrappy. And there's nothing wrong with being proud of it. Absolutely be proud of it. That's a huge obstacle to overcome. But imagine what they could have accomplished if they'd had resources available to them, if they'd had money, if they were that smart and that creative and that resourceful to do so much with so little. Imagine what would have been possible if they'd had more money. And so this poverty pride gets passed down generation to generation to generation, so that you actually believe that it's bad to go for money. It's bad to want more money. You have this image of Scrooge McDuck, who's doing backstrokes through his piles of gold. And, he's not really a nice guy. Squirrel, squirrel.
And that's how I became rich, making the little slices grow. Money shouldn't be idle and must be put to work,
Oh, yeah? How about all that idle dough you got stashed away?
Oh, no, lads. This is just petty cash.
Squirrel, squirrel. But he really loves money. He's really open about it. We also have all these cultural references constantly bombarding us, like The Devil Wears Prada. Miranda Priestley is this rich, powerful woman, and she's a massive bitch. Squirrel, squirrel.
Something funny? No, nothing's, it's just that both those belts look exactly the same to me, I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff?
Squirrel. Okay, we don't want to be like her. And we come from this family that has made it work with so little money. And so we blend that with our ADHD and we get this like magical cocktail of spending our money on things that we don't necessarily need and constantly skating that line of almost poverty because we're afraid to say that we want more. So I'm here to tell you, you have full permission to charge more money, to make more money, to admit that you like money and you love money and you want more money to come to you. That does not make you evil. By the way, money actually just makes you more of who you are. So if you're a good person, having more money will allow you to be a better person because you'll be able to donate to causes that you care about. You'll be able to support political candidates who believe in things that you believe in. You'll be able to help more people in your family and in your community. And you'll be able to live a better life. And that's okay to want that for yourself. So as someone with ADHD and who's an entrepreneur, I can tell you from experience that you can get better at this. There are some hurdles that you have to overcome, however, because one of the main characteristics of most ADHD diagnoses is impulsivity. right? So we make decisions without really thinking them through. And being aware that you operate this way, not just in your day-to-day tasks, but also in making purchases, is going to be really, really important to think about. And so creating some barriers between you and your credit cards, for instance, could be a really easy, simple way to slow yourself down when you're wanting to make a purchase and give yourself some thinking time as to whether this is going to be a good idea or not. The other obstacle that you have to overcome is something that's a little more nuanced. This is something that I work on with my one-on-one clients especially, is that if you already have a big old record book of all the evidence that you're shitty with money, and you keep adding to it, and you have convinced yourself over a lifetime that you're just bad with money, you have to do your work on that. You have to deconstruct all that evidence that you've built up over a lifetime. And also all the evidence that was handed down to you from 7 generations ago that your family is just poor or just bad with money or just can't be trusted, whatever it is. You really, really, really have to do your work there. And it's not easy. It's super, super uncomfortable. But once you do that, once you deconstruct all of that evidence that you're shit with money, you're able to make a new story. You're able to start a new record book that builds evidence towards you're actually good with money. You've actually invested in the right things. You've actually bought all the right resources that you needed to get to this level of success. And imagine if you made better choices with your money going forward, how much more success you could reach in the future. It's really hard to build that new record book, however, with that new belief when you still have that big old record book of how you are with money casting a shadow over it. If you're wanting to start working on that new record book with that new belief that you can actually be good with money and you're ready to let go of that old record book, and I'm gonna call you out here. A lot of people aren't ready to let go of that old record book. That record book actually serves them. It keeps them safe because it gives them a reason to not be successful. Gives them an excuse. Oh, I'm just bad with money. Yeah. Oh, I just made a bad choice here. If you're constantly saying that as an excuse for why things aren't working out, you may not be ready for this. But if you are ready to let that go, if you're ready to let go of that excuse, of all that garbage that's been handed down to you through generations, thanks, Mom and Dad, then I want you to book a call with me. In this call, we're going to talk about what your core beliefs around your money are and what you want for yourself instead. We're also going to start building a strategy to help you get there. And if you want to book this, there's a link in the show notes. Where was I? You can rectify it. I just poked myself in the eye. I just poked myself in the eye. I just poked myself in the eye.